Everyone, it's PTP here to give you my deck tech for my Mimeoplasm deck. This is the first ever EDH deck I've ever built, so it's kind of a pet deck for me. It's built more towards multiplayer and a little bit more towards a fun deck. A couple cards that you really should include is Death Shadow. Basically, it kills itself because it gets negative X, where X is your life total, and it's a 13/13. It's really good to put counters on someone with Mimeoplasm, but I think it's more of a one-on-one card. I find a lot of times late in the game, some of my X, Lumagoyf and Mortivore type cards are stronger. The other card I want to talk about is Mesmeric Orb. Mesmeric Orb is stupid in this deck. It mills like crazy and it makes your deck very strong. It's not looked upon well by my play group, so I kind of took it out because I said this is more of a fun deck and I kind of play it casually. So we'll start it off. Our commander, of course, is Mimeoplasm. Altered Art. Basically, for anyone who doesn't know what Mimeoplasm does, Mimeoplasm removes 2 creatures from any graveyards, and it's a copy of one creature, and it gets X counters equal to the other creature's power. So this is definitely a graveyard deck. We'll go on to our mana base. So we run 8 Force in this deck. Also 8 Islands. And then 10 Swamps. I run 14 non-basic lands in this deck. Mesa Ith is there to help protect ourselves. Rupture Spire, I know some people don't like it, but I think it's acceptable in EDH. This Restless Tomb card is really strong late game. It lets you reanimate a creature, or becomes a creature power toughness equal to the number of creatures in all graveyards, so it can be really big when we've got our milling going. Command Tower is a must include in all EDH decks. Temple of the False God, I think, is something that's strong. It is situational, but when it works, it's really working. This is not optimal. It's a dual land that comes into play tapped and gains you 1 life. This card here, Dreadship Reef, I think it's slept on. I honestly didn't like it at first, but it actually saved me a couple times, so I kind of always leave it in. Then we have our bounce lands, 1 for each of our color groupings. Terramorphic Expanse. In this deck, I included 1 of the cycling lands for each of our colors. I really think they're great in EDH late game. They help you get rid of useless lands or dead draws. Avenize. Now, on to our instance. Avenize, I think, is a really slept on card. In EDH, the ability to take away a creature's abilities is really strong. It kills Avacyn. It kills a lot of things that you normally can't deal with. Pongify, it's a removal for 1. That creature's controller does get a 3/3 token, but in the end of the day, we're usually taking out something better than that. Rend Flesh is not optimal, but sometimes you just got to rend someone's flesh, and spirits need a little love too. Putrefy, self-explanatory, versatile removal. Capsize, this is really a stud of a deck. This is really our stud removal. A lot of times we do search for this. It stalls the game, and it's reusable. Beast Within, I mean, it hits everything. Fact or Fiction is really strong in this deck because it's always good to throw some creatures in the graveyard, and it is card advantage. Gerard's Order tutors 2 creatures, puts 1 of them in your hand, 1 in the graveyard. We love creatures in the graveyard in this deck, and some of our creatures are graveyard specific. Demonic Tutor, you can never get enough tutors in EDH. And this one's one of the best. Bribery. Bribery is also like a tutor. It takes a creature out of the opponent's library. The great thing about this is when the opponent actually does deal with the creature, unless they bounce it, it ends up in their graveyard where we can use them again for Mimeoplasm. So it's great for pulling out things that we want to Mimeoplasm later. Life's Finale. This is another board wipe, but I really like this board wipe because we can search the opponent's library for 3 creature cards and put it into their graveyard, so it really does help the Mimeoplasm deck. Genesis Wave, because this card's just too good to not include. It's not optimal in this deck, but a lot of times when we hit it, we either put heavy creatures into our graveyard or we build up some defenses with some creatures. So it's Another way of milling and getting things in play. Living Death is definitely a situational board wipe, but I find that in this deck we can really set up our graveyard to use it towards our advantage. It's really stupid with cards like Buried Alive or Gerard's Order, and if you can pull it off third turn, Buried Alive, fifth turn, Living Death, you're in good position. Exsanguinate, too good not to include. This card really is all-star in multiplayer. Damnation, because sometimes you just need to send everyone to hell. Rigor Mortis, this card returns a creature from the graveyard to play. And the fact that it's green, you get an extra 1/1 counter. Cultivate, can never get enough ramp. We have Stitch Together here. It returns a creature from your graveyard to your hand. If you have Threshold, which we like to do, it returns it to play. Rise from the Grave is another card that returns a creature from the graveyard to play, but this one is all graveyards, not just your own. Increasing Ambition is a card I really like in this deck. It's another tutor, but the good thing is that when we mill it away, we can actually pay its flashback to tutor for 2 cards, so it really does come in handy. Bramble Crush takes out Planeswalkers, takes out a lot of other things. Buried Alive, once again, it brings 3 creature cards to your graveyard. It can help with setting up a Mimeoplasm. You do have to be careful about overextending with it. I've had my graveyard removed a couple times. Memory Erosion. This card really sets the tempo of the game. It sometimes stops your opponents from playing things in fear of getting milled, and it also makes the graveyards bigger, which is always a good thing in this deck. Greed, because I'm hella greedy. This card I think is really underestimated, especially in EDH. It's really a tempo card. I think sometimes I'll pay 4, 6, 8 life just to really draw an answer. And I think where people don't realize is instead of a card like Phyrexian Arena, the difference between this card is it does cost you more life, but you can do it whenever you need to do it. So you can use it when your mana is appropriate, and you can also do it more than once a turn. Oblivion Stone is really a board wipe, and it's kind of useful because you can protect some things. Soul Ring, just because. This card's better in one-on-one, but it's never bad to have a Soul Ring. Whisperstep Cloak, it's always great to have Mimeoplasm A, untargetable, and 2, unblockable. Greaves, once again, we want to protect Mimeoplasm. Then we go to the Planeswalkers. There's 2 in here. Vraska the Unseen. I use her mainly for her removal ability. The 1/1s are nice, but it's kind of hard to get to, and she does protect herself with a +1. Jace is here, mainly to draw cards. When you get his ultimate off, it is really nice, especially in multiplayer. It's almost an automatic win. Avatar Woe, she's stronger when we get the graveyards filled up, as well as she's really good when we bring her back with Mimeoplasm. Havengal Leech is like my second commander. He's really great at bringing creatures back from the graveyard, and the thing about him is he can make this deck function without your commander, so if your commander ever gets shuffled away or is too expensive to cast, he really does a good job of filling in. Mortivore, his power and toughness is equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. He regenerates himself, and the great thing is he keeps his power and toughness even when he's in the graveyard. Triskelion is really strong in this deck. When he gets Mimeoplasm back into play, he can be very big, and the ability to remove all the 1/1 counters that Mimeoplasm puts on him can make him quite strong. As well as he does set up a lot of combo potential for people who are down for that. Gravedigger. This card just really brings a creature card from a graveyard to our hand, and he's a chump blocker. Rexall the Deep Risen. Now, he's a little bit expensive, but Island Walk and Swamp Walk is really strong. A lot of times he's unblockable. Those colors are quite popular, and the ability to play a instant sorcery spell from the opponent's graveyard is very strong in EDH because the quality of spells are quite high. Evil Twin, he's here. Clones are always removal in EDH. They take care of commanders, and this guy can axe regular creatures too with his second ability. Solemn Simulacrum, because I think he's one of the best creatures in Magic. He cantrips, and he finds you a land, and he's colorless mana, so he's always good. Mauldrifter draws you 2 cards, and sometimes you actually have to Mimeoplasm for him to fill your hand up. Limmergoyf is another XX, where his power and toughness is equal to the creatures, except he gets +1. He's just really there to make things bigger when they get Mimeoplasmed. Dreamborn Muse is really one of our top milling cards. What this card does is it really does put in work, and he does become a target, so often opponents waste mill spells on him. And sometimes I even found myself Mimeoplasming him back into play just to make future Mimeoplasm stronger. Troll Ascetic. This card is more of a protection card. It's when we're more on the defensive. It stalls and it keeps us alive. Artisan of Kodalek, just because, with the quality of the creatures, if you can cast him for his full cast cost of 9, he becomes really strong because there's a lot of great things to bring back in this deck. And he's never a bad Mimeoplasm, even though you don't get his recurring ability. Sewer Nemesis is another XX creature. He's a little bit different. When he comes into play, you pick a player, and his power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in that player's graveyard. The thing that makes him different also is that when that player casts a spell, they have to mill a card. So he does a little bit of milling. The one thing you have to worry about Sewer Nemesis is if he gets milled away, his power and toughness is equal to 0 because it only starts when he's in the graveyard, when he's put into play. Diaz Avenger is a champion of all Mimeoplasm decks. He's a card that I really underestimated. I mean, you can see his ability is great. The fact that for 0 he gives himself double strike, protection from red, vigilance, and shadow at the cost of -1/1 until end of turn. All these abilities are strong, and where he really comes into play is when you can Mimeoplasm. At a 4/4, you're not really quite able to take advantage of all his abilities, but when you get him up to 6 or 7, or even bigger, then he really becomes a problem to deal with. Shieldred. Shieldred is all around strong. It brings creatures back from the graveyard, makes players sack creatures, and swamp walk. I mean, he's really just a target. Runescar Demon. Because tutoring is always great, in this deck, anything on a stick is better. So anytime a creature's ability can be replaced with a card, I think it's a good choice in this deck. So Runescar comes into play, he tutors, he can be Mimeoplasm back. Same thing with Eternal Witness, and you guys know about her. Palaka Worm is an underestimated card. It gains you 7 life, and it cantrips as well. It's good when you play him by itself. It's also great to Mimeoplasm back to life. Keeps you alive as well. Acidic Slime is here more for removal. It takes care of artifacts, enchantments, or lands, and it has Death Touch. Chancellor of Spires is really good in this deck. If you have Chancellor of Spires in opening hand, it increases your chances to win drastically. It mills opponents from the beginning. It also, when you play him, you can cast the instant or sorcery spell from an opponent's graveyard. The Somberwatch Sage is in here because this deck is almost a quarter creatures, and it gives you 3 mana when you play creature spells. Gerard, this card is also very strong. It gets stronger for each creature card in your graveyard, but its ability in multiplayer EDH is ridiculous, especially when you have fat Mimeoplasm creatures on. It can make each opponent lose life equal to the sacrificed creature's power and toughness, and he can be recurred. So this guy is very strong. Wonder, this is one of the creatures that we want to get into our graveyard because everyone we have flying. Kendrick Leviathan is removal for us. He returns all permanents to play, and with its unearth ability, we can use him twice. Arcanist draws his cards, and it's just general card advantage. Sizik, Lord of Secrets, is one of our main milling threats. If Sizik would deal combat damage to a player, instead put that many 1/1 counters on Sizik, and that player puts that many cards from the top of his library into his graveyard. If he even hits for a second time, he puts a good chunk into their graveyard, and he really sets up some nice Mimeoplasms. Really strong, and people really target him, so he's a good threat. Vorinclex, same thing. He's a Mimeoplasm target, and when he's in play, it makes it hard for people to recover after they remove him. And finally, we have Genesis. Now, Genesis is a creature we want to get into our graveyard, because once he's there, if we pay 3 at the beginning of our upkeep, we can return a creature card to our hand. So he's really good at reusing creatures, and if we can get him into the graveyard, he's an all-star. Well, anyway, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys later.